Now, with this, let's explore, Brett, are design systems now and atomic design dead?
Let's find out.
Let's find out. Well, give a round of warm applause to Brett Frost, everyone.
Thank you so much. Hey, hey. Guten Morgen. This is a hell of a way to start a conference, and I'm so excited to be here. This is amazing. This is a very important stage. I feel like this really is where I stopped caring and started just kind of being myself, which you'll soon find out is kind of weird. It's like up until then I was trying to be professional, and I've learned that I'm a very unprofessional professional. So it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks so much for being here. And now let's get into it, to our clickbait title. Is atomic design dead? Right? It's a good question, but let's actually take a little bit of a history lesson in this historic building. So, August 6, 1991, the world's first website came into being, right? Sir Tim Berners-Lee, right around this region, right around this area, a couple hours away. And we had really only one way to make websites, and that was with our good friend, HTML. And what does HTML stand for? Hotmail. Thank you, Mom. Judy Frost, everybody. So at that time, HTML was it. Not actually Hotmail, but I remember whenever I was starting that journey, Bob was like, oh, I know that. But we had websites, so that was the only thing that we had at our disposal, right? And then in the mid-90s, in 1996, there was a book called Creating Killer Websites, and we started learning how to use Photoshop to create these websites and transfer our brochures over into the World Wide Web. And we ended up with this thing called the slice tool, and we used to slice little border radius images, all 4 of them, in order to achieve a rounded corner. And around this time, in the mid-90s, is when CSS emerged. Things like GeoCities emerged. And then all of a sudden, it was like, okay, this internet thing has some legs, and not only do we now have a website, we now have 2 websites, right? We have our internet website and our intranet website, right? So it's like, okay, this thing is showing some utility. And so already you could start to see this dynamic happening where it's like, okay, we have these multiple digital things, and we need to kind of glue them together and make sure that they're all following the same standards. And we have these old brand books, right? So we dust off this old hardbound book that shows us what our logos and our colors are, and we start to use those to inform our web designs. And then Web 2.0 comes out around 2004. We have like web standards era, and jQuery starts entering the scene. We have Macromedia Flex. We have all of these things kind of happening, but what happens at this Web 2.0 level is that, the web gets a little bit more interactive, right? It's not just the brochure anymore. We could actually do some things, right? So yet, we create a web app for the first time in these kind of early 2000s. And then in 2007, Steve Jobs stands on stage with a one more thing kind of thing here, and then all of a sudden we enter this mobile era, and yet, so we end up with iOS apps and Android apps, more Photoshop, more things being informed by the brand style guide. And then Photoshop starts showing its pretty limited things. This is not a digital design tool, right? So we start having other things. Of course, there are things like fireworks and other things. Oh, great tools back in the day. But then this tool called Sketch comes out, and all of a sudden we start having this new era of interface design tools, and that starts taking over. And then in about sort of 2011, we start getting these other tools like Bootstrap that start helping developers, right, make our websites a little bit better, right? So around this time is really whenever pattern libraries and what we are calling like style guides and all of these other things. Here's these copy and pastable HTML snippets and this CSS file you could drop into your website. This starts helping developers make things a little bit better, which is important because we're starting to support more things. Right? And so, yeah, so we have these tools like Bootstrap, but then we also have these like kind of homegrown pattern libraries and things like that, right? And this was with people like Natalie Down and Nathan Curtis start coming online at like 2009 and talking about modularity, Anna Debenham, but also we have things like CSS modular approaches, like Nicole Sullivan's OOCSS, Jonathan Snook's SMAX, and BEM syntax kind of starting to get introduced. And then we start entering this new era where there's these new JavaScript frameworks that start coming on the scene, right? In 2012, Angular enters the scene. That's whenever I was first here. And then the next year, I was back over here at Beyond Tellerrand and back here in Freiburg to talk about this thing called atomic design. 3 weeks later, React was released. And also some other tools start coming online, right? So we have this new era starting to emerge, right, to help us make websites better, faster. But also these brand guidelines, these brand style guides are not doing their jobs as well. So around this time, we start having these like UI kits that start sort of floating around where it's like you have in the design world some copy-pastable sticker sheets or whatever we want to call them, right? And then in 2014, and so we start pooping out a lot of React websites, but also the technology gets a bit better with things like ES modules, which actually allows us to deliver packages of JavaScript and share them between different web pages. And that opens the door to a whole lot of things. Because what this allows us to do is to actually create a component library and actually deliver that and serve that to our downstream applications that are using it. So it's no longer just these dotted lines that kind of share a spiritual connection. It's really a direct connection to this source. And that really matters because all of these things just continue to keep growing, and we start making more things, and our pattern library is serving more things, and we have the pattern library and the React library kind of talking to each other. And then all of a sudden, this thing called Figma comes out in 2016, and it's like, okay, all right, things are getting interesting here. And then in 2017, both in Sketch and Figma, they release this thing called libraries, which gives designers the same thing that developers start getting with these ES modules, right? Where you could actually be connected, no more just kind of copying and pasting little rectangles and then nudging them around. We could actually deliver these components to other design files, and that's really exciting. And then it's kind of around this era that we're like, man, there's something here. We've been calling it, whenever I was writing my book, Atomic Design, in 2014 or 2015, I remember going through, whenever I was about to finish the book, going back through and kind of updating the word style guide and calling it design system. I remember it like kind of emerging, and it was like, here's this thing that kind of encapsulates this idea of how we think about user interface design, and all of this stuff. Things like ClarityConf with Gina Ann come out in 2016. We have Storybook released in 2016, 2017, and stuff like that. And this starts helping us better define how we create our user interfaces. So, and also around here, Gina was at Salesforce. and their Lightning design system team, they came out with this term called design tokens, which basically helps actually create this connection between our Figma libraries, our pattern libraries, and our documentation and all of that stuff that actually allows us to share our design languages, like here's Starbucks green or here's Coca-Cola red, and we're actually able to sort of deliver that and share that across different things. And this is really important, especially for supporting things like non-web environments in addition to our web stuff. And then you could see we just kind of keep going and making more things, Vue and Svelte and the rest of them, and GitHub repos breed like rabbits. And we just kind of continue this long, foamy churn of invention and making more and more and more and more things. And this is starting to get complicated. So there's this technology that's kind of been in the background for like 10 years being developed called web components, which is a native web way of delivering little packages of code to all of these different environments. So you no longer have to create a React version of your components and an Angular version of your components and a Vue version of your components. You could actually just kind of create this in one place and then actually deliver it to all these different places, right? And then 2019, Figma eats Sketch's lunch, just full stop. It's just like Figma takes over, steamrolls everything. So that kind of simplifies the game here a little bit. The like one person still using Sketches, shedding a single tear in the back row. It's like Tiny Tim looking through the glass and the Christmas dinner. It's like, please, can I? And then we have our friends at Zero Height who are here that kind of help glue all of this stuff together and actually give us more of a direct connection to actually import our stuff from code, import our stuff from design, maintaining those sources of truth, but then kind of putting it all under one nice home base, and we could write documentation and talk about what is this thing and how do you use it and here's who it's for and all of that good stuff. And just along the way, we're doing all of these other things like child design systems and stuff like that, which, Material is Google's design system, but then they also have things like YouTube and Google Maps and Gmail and all of these other kind of product-specific things. So just one design system isn't enough to hold it all. So you have that, right? But so kind of pulling back here, what we end up with is we now have this design system that's able to serve all of these products, right? And what this relationship, the relationship that gets established is that we have a design system that informs and influences what can be built using that design system, right? And then also we have the products that help inform and influence what ingredients live in the design system, right? So it becomes this virtuous cycle wherever one thing's informing the other thing. As the quality of the system improves, the quality of the products improve. As the products improve, the quality of the system improves. Life is good. But is it? Because achieving that balance is hard. And what's kind of emerged, what I've seen over the last number of years, we've fought tooth and nail to get people to pay attention to design systems. Hey, you actually need to give this some love. This is really important, critical UI infrastructure that is going to make our whole organization move a lot faster, make websites, prevent duplication. It's going to save tons of money, tons of time, all of this stuff. And we're like, hell yeah. And so we create design system teams, we create design system, workflows, and this ends up creating this separation between the design systems and the rest of the product organization that needs to use this stuff. And so this dynamic ends up hurting us because we're far away from each other, right? The design system team is up in an ivory tower, and the rest of everybody else is working on real problems, and there's a lot of disconnect and distance between them. Or the relationship is a little harder, right? Where the design system team, here comes the pattern police to come and clobber the products and say, no, 9. Can't do this. You can't do that. Verboten, right? It's like, right, we can't do that, right? So that's one dynamic. And then the other not happy Pac-Man rule is that the product just absorbs and eats the design system, right? So this is really tricky balance to get right, right? And that's why all these years later, I think that atomic design is a really helpful mental model, is a really helpful metaphor, is a way of thinking about things, but also a way of really practicing design systems, because we need to create this connection between between the products we serve and the underlying systems. So we're going to get into that in a little bit, but first I want to take you on a tour of old Brad Frost's inbox. Do we have sound here, just to make sure? Maybe? Yeah? Is it invisible sound? Sorry. Is it showing up? Okay. That's all good, but yeah. While you're doing that, I get weird emails. If anybody's followed me on social media over the years, I have a thing called Just Another Day, an old Brad Frost email. And hi, Brad, I was wondering if you read mail with empty subjects. That's the entirety of the message. Hi, Brad, I haven't heard back from you despite my several attempts to contact you. I really start to worry. Please let me know if there's any way I could help or call 911. I'm a retired pre-press graphic artist, Mac operator. Hope it's okay that I scooped your Monopoly Photoshop file to use on my dead cat's public and not-for-profit Facebook site, Cheddar's Dreams. I do not advertise anything. Nothing is for sale. My aim is to educate and entertain while keeping my brain in shape. So, of course, I checked out Cheddar's Dreams, and there we go. That's what it is. But I bring this up because I have been, for as long as atomic design's been around, I'm like, don't worry about the labels, don't worry about all of this classification. But for years and years and years and years and years, I have been getting so many emails about people correcting me, trying to do something different, and saying, what about this? And me and my colleagues are about to have a fist fight about what to classify this component as. I'm like, please don't do that, right? But so lots and lots of people are like, why did you do this? Why did you call it like this, right? Because that is a problem, right? What about elements, modules, and patterns? Like, literally have like 12 years of these kinds of emails, right? And even just earlier this year, somebody in the transcript of my book in the GitHub repository opens a PR to change pages to screens. So I'm like, boy, you guys are tenacious. But so atomic design, so the labels don't matter. None of this stuff matters, but when I created atomic design, it's atoms, molecules, organisms, templates, and pages. And you could take any user interface, whether it's a website, whether it's a native app, whether it's a bank kiosk, whether it's a seat back screen, it doesn't really matter what it is. And you could apply this methodology, this mental model for sort of breaking down or deconstructing any UI into its atomic elements. And you could see how they come together to form increasingly complex components, right? So at the atomic level, we have things like labels and inputs and buttons. And then at the molecule level, we put those things together to create these relatively simple components. And then at the organism level, we make these more complex components that all contain their own properties, their own environments, their own responsive behavior. They take on their own DNA in the same way that hydrogen and oxygen on their own exhibit certain qualities. You put them together in a certain configuration, you get a water molecule, or you get a hydrogen peroxide molecule. Two very different things that exhibit their own properties, right? At the template level, we are able to put all of this together into a UI screen, but this is really like the skeletal system of everything. Because really at the page level that we really pour in the specific state and user status and images and text and all of the stuff that the actual user ends up seeing, right? So this mental model, all these years later, continues to draw this through line, right, to show how the systems that we create actually create real stuff, right? That this isn't just a hypothetical design exercise or this like kind of theoretical thing. No, you're able to actually draw a line between the checkbox and how that thing is used on the checkout flow, right? So here's where we're at. Life is good. Most organizations, raise your hand if you have a design system at your work. That's a lot of hands. So here we all are, right? And each one of these things has, what, alerts, form fields, cards, buttons, right? Date picker component. Anybody got a date picker component? Anybody have to make a date picker component? Here we are. Here's the rub, my friends. We should not be all making date picker components. That is not a respectful use of anyone's time on Earth. That is like one person in the world's job. You do not want to be writing logic around the Gregorian calendar. It is not a good use of your time on Earth. So, here we are, right? It's like, okay, well, problem solved, I guess, right? And so I don't think so. And that's why I'm here to kind of talk about this idea called a global design system. And basically, I think that we need one date picker for the world, not 700,000. You might be saying, well, Brad, we have input type equals date. Have you seen that thing? Not great. But that's no shade, but like there's like a lack of stylability, there's a lack of customization. A lot of these things are really what I kind of call like low level, just like IKEA parts. It's like dumping a bunch of dowel rods and screws and particle board out on the living room floor and just being like, go build your mom. Go build your what's another IKEA name? Mom. We'll stick with mom. But it's like, it's a little bit like the draw the rest of the owl kind of thing, right? And so there's a lot of work that has to happen to do that, and a lot of opportunities for things to slip between the cracks. Every year, WebAIM produces this thing called the WebAIM Million, where they crawl the top 1,000,000 websites in the world, and it is the most thoroughly depressing report that comes out every year. It's like 95% of websites have like 47 critical accessibility errors, and that's actually good because last year it used to be 98%, and it's like we're doing great, we're kicking ass, right? So it's like, okay, there's a lot lost in translation. There's not a lot there, and then it's like, well, we have material design, right? We have Bootstrap. We already have this stuff, right? So why don't we just use those? And this is like whenever I started talking about this is this meme here, which is just like everybody is sort of saying different things and saying, but at the same time, it's like, do we really want to make every website have a ripple effect when you click on a button, right? It's like, no, I know you can turn that off and stuff, but it's like, that's kind of the issue with a lot of these existing systems is that they ship with like a default aesthetic, right? So the spirit of these things is good, but at the same time, it's giving us too much, and then we have to hack it and undo it and do all of these crazy backflips. Not very great, right? So I see this gap in between this world of kind of, HTML as a language, which is comprehensive. It is having to solve literally every problem that comes, the whole bell curve, right, including these pretty extreme things. That's why it's so rigorous. That's why these things take so long. They're doing the Lord's work, and I don't know how these people do it because it is very trying from a patient's perspective to get this stuff going. And then, of course, you have these existing sort of open source design systems and organization-specific design systems that we're all dealing with. And I see that there's this gap that can be sort of filled in between that is like a good pragmatic ideal, the platonic ideal for a date picker, right? The platonic ideal for an alert. And is this thing comprehensive? Is this going to solve literally every problem? No. But guess what? We still have access to all the dowel rods and all the screws. But what I've learned over 12 years of doing this stuff is that people want the prefab stuff. Like, it's just, give me the stuff that's assembled, give me the thing to copy and paste, give me the thing to throw in there, but I want it to be blessed, I want it to be accessible, I want it to be rigorous, I want it to be internationalized, I want it to be localized, I want it to be private, I want it to be secure, all of that stuff. So the work that we've been doing for the last year or so has been putting this in place as part of this W3C community group called OpenUI. And anyone here is welcome to join it and join the party, right? So they've been doing this work since long before I got involved, and they've basically been rounding up a lot of the work that they see across many popular design systems, and they're figuring out how to distill it. The first part was into the actual browser track, right? But then they're learning that it's like, do we really need like a skeleton component HTML tag? Doesn't make sense. Do we really need a badge HTML tag? Do we really need a card HTML tag? Do we really need a button HTML tag? Well, we have that. But then we also need these kind of compositions, right? We need these kind of composed things that sit on top of it. So that's what we're looking at, right? We want this global design system to exist. Oh, that's like a slow transition. All right. Keynote. I'm going too fast, right? So what does this look like? What might this look like, I should say? Because this is where we're at in this process, is actually starting to get into the weeds and figuring out how we want to hash this out. Do we want to have web component libraries that have things like button groups and buttons and our date picker things so that people could just, wire this stuff up and throw it into their website and have it be done? Initially, we kind of started talking about web components, and now we're kind of also talking about just really exposing the raw HTML and CSS for all of this as well. So it's like it's not an either or, it's kind of a both and kind of thing. And that matters here in a little second. I will talk about that. But this is the problem, right? We've been talking about this, and we say, like, boy, we have all of these different websites. We're supporting all of these different things, right? How could you possibly create a single date picker that works well for all of them, right? Again, on one hand, you still have access to all the low-level ingredients, so if it doesn't serve your needs, you're free to go build it. But our websites look more like this, right? They're all over the place, right? A pharmaceutical site's needs versus a nonprofit versus a Bitcoin. Why did I just say Bitcoin? You get what I mean, right? Different categories, different needs, different audiences, different needs, right? Different brands, sub-brands, right? We call this the multi-all-the-things organization. We're all supporting some flavor of this, right? Multiple digital products, multiple brands, frameworks, platforms, redesigns, rebrands, you name it. It's hard. So in order for a global design system or any of our design systems to support this multi-all-the-things reality, we need to revisit this old concept that was introduced in the 1970s called the separation of concerns. And we mostly know it through the three languages of the web. HTML provides the semantics and the structure, CSS provides the style, and JavaScript controls the behavior and the functionality, right? It's the thing that's actually making the accordion open and close, right, when we click on it or switch tabs. So this idea of separation of concerns has been a part of the web for a long, long time. CSS Zen Garden is like the perfect example that really articulated this separation of concerns. But if you need a door and you're in the market for a door, you go to the hardware store and you go to the door aisle. And you're going to see a handful of doors, right, with some holes for the doorknob, with some hinges. It's sitting on a frame of a certain dimension, right, to pass the appropriate zoning and accessibility requirements and meet all of those constraints, right? And it has what you need for a door to open and close. But what if you need an orange door, right? I don't see an orange door in the door aisle. I guess I need to go find a different store, right? Of course, this is a separate concern, right? But that's a separate aisle. Right? Same thing with our door hardware. Do you want brushed nickel? Do you want brass? Do you want gold? Do you want matte black for that sexy European look? I know I do. So revisiting this idea, though, the lines aren't as clear. Things got fuzzy, in part because these technologies got big and more capable, and JavaScript got giant. And we started doing literally everything in JavaScript, for better and for worse, right? So we need to revisit this idea, though, because this is still a sound concept. So what we need to do is start to create a new separation of concerns where we have our structural stuff, which includes our HTML, but also includes our structural JavaScript and provides our structural CSS, similar to how the hinges of the door need to be positioned on either the right or the left of the door in order for it to open or close, right? Those are not like aesthetic or cosmetic styles. That's actually very critical to the functionality of this thing, right? So we need to sort of split out, make a separation between like the aesthetic styles and the structural things. And so that's what we've been doing for the last number of years as an industry, is kind of creating these UI component systems that kind of give us our door frames. And then we create these things called design token systems that control all of the aesthetic look and feel. And with these systems in place, we flow our design tokens through our door frames in order to achieve whatever result we are going for, right? So what we have here, in order to create this specific button, we have our low-level door frame button component, right, that provides all of our just kind of default bare-bone look and feel stuff, but also maybe some positioning stuff and stuff that is important for the box model. And then we're able to sort of feed in our specific organization's brand style guides, right? Color palette, typography, spacing, border radius values, box shadows, animation, and so on and so forth, right? And so this is a really potent combination because this allows us to have all of the benefits of these shared systems, right? So that the world can capitalize on that single date picker, but also be able to skin it for whatever you want, right? You're doing, just even yesterday at our workshop, there's a guy is showing us his company's website, and they rent photo booths and for weddings and for Halloween. And those are kind of two different vibes, right? So it's like he was showing how they do it, and the date picker was like themed. And so you got the nice regal and sexy wedding one that sort of gets people to hire the photo booth for the wedding, and then you also have the more fun, funky stuff for your Halloween party, right? So that's what we're talking about here. And this is kind of my new adventure. Me and my brother have been creating online courses, and this was the first one that we did because this was the thing that we've just worked with so many teams and organizations to effectively get them to the same place, where it's like you just need to put the sound architecture in place, agree on some names, wire this stuff up in design and in code. And so we put this course together that kind of provides a lot of these concepts and how to do this and how to manage it, maintain it, and integrate it, and as well as like kind of a boilerplate architecture to get you started, because we just see teams flailing, right? So give you a discount code, a little 20%, because I love you all. So check it out, but this is literally how I'm feeding my family. So if you wouldn't mind just spreading the word, I would greatly appreciate it. But also, just to repeat too, like if you want to get involved with the Open UI initiative, that is an open community. We're in the process of like figuring out how should we name our CSS classes, and how should we write our HTML? What are the principles? What are the actual conventions that we're all going to follow? And so we're at a really exciting point in time because we're about to let this rip and have like the world-renowned experts that are, many of them, involved in the W3 standards process, kind of participating in this effort, right? Because the whole idea is to like really make this something that we feel confident about, and people can go, oh, these accessibility experts and these privacy experts and these browser makers and these people all like kind of blessed this date picker component, hell yeah, copy, paste, done, right? So we would love you to be a part of that. The last thing that we're saying about this initiative as we're getting in here, and one of the things that's really changed over the last year, is that we've been kind of talking about this so far today, right? We're a bunch of humans and we're making websites, right? And we need a global design system to help us with that. We are the ones kind of making these things. And of course, we are now entering this new era where all of a sudden we have humans using AI to make these websites and these experiences. And this is really tricky business. And we have a lot of people doing this right now. Holy shit. I don't know if this actually came true or not, but I really like this 90% number here. But it was like, we are now basically just the world is being flooded, right, with this AI-generated content of every stripe, of every format. And that 90% number stuck out to me because also in 2013, I gave a talk called Death to Bullshit. And I made a website out of that I think I might need to revisit soon here, because what I was doing was talking about this idea of just kind of creating more respectful user experiences, because I just saw all of the noise and all of the bullshit and all of the cruft and all of the crap and all of just the garbage surrounding our existence, our digital life. This was actually the first website that my brother helped me build. I was like, Ian, you're going to learn how to become a web developer, and you're going to do this. But this 90%, yeah, we ended up with like an infinite scroll of creepy girl. So science fiction writer Theodore Sturgeon was once asked in an interview. The interviewer asked, why is 90% of science fiction writing crap? And he goes, well, when you think about it, 90% of everything is crap. And that became what's known as Sturgeon's law, right? And so we have a decision to make, right? Do we want to be part of the 90% of crap and noise and participate in this, or do we want to be part of the 10% that actually gives a shit, right? A lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of people doing this work, right? There's an opportunity here, and dare I say a responsibility here, to do this, right? To be on the other side of what these things are generating. To answer the question, is it good? Is it good? Is such an important question in this moment in time, on every level, a societal level, at a technology level, everything. Is it good? This takes longer than this, right? This is the easy path, right? Injecting ourselves and injecting our humanity on the other end of these things takes time, skill, and talent. We're at a really interesting moment in time where a lot of people are freaking out. Probably a lot of people in this room, right? Is AI going to take our jobs? That's the narrative, writ large. Vitaly, you know you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Turns out this is not a new thing, right? John Henry's hammer, all of this stuff, right? There's a lot of historical precedent for, is this new technology going to take my job? I'd like to share with you the Roland CR78, which was the world's first drum machine that had a microprocessor in it and gave the user the ability to save their own sequences, to save their own beats. Up until then, if you've ever seen like an old like Wurlitzer organ and there's like a bossa nova switch, oh, I love those things. They're amazing. But they were these like accompaniment tools, right? And there was no real threat at that point because it was really just kind of like a straight beat, not really even like changing. I think you could change the tempo, but that was about it, right? There wasn't anything sophisticated you could do with it. With the ability to program your own beats and you get these higher quality sounds, all of a sudden, the world of studio musicians and professional drummers start going, wait a minute, that's my job. Is this drum machine going to take my job? Here's what the Roland CR78 sounds like. I hope that the audio works. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That drum beat, which I saw at least several dozen people do, is the most recognizable, tops the list of any, look, just do a Google search, top drum fills of all time, is Mr. Phil Collins, one of the most legendary drummers of all time, right? Genesis, his own stuff. And to take this nascent technology and to not see it as a threat, but to see it for what it is, which is a tool to be a vehicle to express himself, to create his art, to ultimately resonate with millions and millions and millions of people all over the world, right? We are Phil Collins. We are Phil Collins in this moment. So I'd like you to practice a little mantra. Anytime you have a conversation, read a LinkedIn post, read a news article that says, AI is going to take our jobs. I'd like you to say it with me now. I am Phil Collins. 3, 2, 1. I am Phil Collins. There we go. Wait, hey, hang on, I'm not done yet. Not done yet. Not done yet. I promise I'm close. But can we switch back to my slides? Is that possible? I appreciate that. I could just mic drop the weird. Okay. But we're human beings, right? We make tools. That's what we do. We have actually been making tools since before we were even Homo sapiens, right? Some of the oldest stone tools predate Homo sapiens by a long shot, right? We have been doing this for a long time. Fire, the wheel, steel, concrete, the steam engine, personal computer, the internet. These are all technologies that shape the world, right? These are all tools. And what we do as human beings is leverage tools and technologies in order to go places, to be able to sort of harness this stuff, not reject it wholly, not say it's also, the Lord and going to save us from everything, but really, really see it for what it is, which is a tool, a technology. To be able to take something like steam and put it somewhere and direct it through pipes and tubes in order to create forward momentum, to create forward movement. I see this as our opportunity to take our current state, what I see all around us. We've all been through some really hard times lately. And all of these feelings are valid. Everything is valid. And there's some real stuff here. There's some real concerns. There's some real worries around this. There's environmental impact. There's all of this stuff. There's creative rights. There's intellectual property. There's so much that we have to worry about, to actually think about. But friends, this is what we need to do in every aspect of our lives, of society. So we have to be able to think nuanced thoughts. We need critical thinking. We cannot be either or. We cannot be yes, no. We cannot exist in the realm of false binaries. We have to figure out ways to actually address the real hard and negative things and convert that and to work with those constraints, but also to invent and use our humanity. Your humanity is what's needed in this moment in time. It's not about which model to learn or which tool or which Figma plugin or which thing's going to win. We need our humanity. We have to reclaim our humanity, our curiosity, our creativity, our collaboration, and our enthusiasm. So I'm so glad you're here because you're going to get a mega dose of it over the next couple days. With that, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Brett. We have around 5 minutes of time for Q&A. Also, if you have questions for Brett later, of course, please feel free to drop by the fireplace, and I'm sure you'll be happy to answer some questions. I think so many things resonated with me. I think I do want to bring up questions that also came from the audience, though. One of the things that came up quickly is, so atomic design now.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would have done something, you would be doing something differently if you were to design it today or think about the concept of design system today?
The mental model of atomic design still rings true.
So not dead?
So not dead, no.
That was a very quick answer.
Yeah, no, but at the same time, like, I feel like it's sound, and you could, like, and I kind of started doing it, like with the design tokens, you could kind of like tack that on as like the subatomic particles of design systems, and had design tokens existed as a concept, whenever I created atomic design, I probably would have added them into the mix. But then there's all other things like, over the years, people have talked about like, there's user interface as one dimension, and in the complexity, that's what I'm sort of dealing with. That's only one dimension, but then you also have time, right?
Yep.
So you have like people working through a flow. You have how this stuff all kind of hangs together as more of a, a cohesive whole, and you could scale that up to organization levels and stuff. So you can get crazy with it. And again, old Brad Frost emails, like people have been quick to share that stuff with me. So it's like, if you're not careful, I feel like you can kind of just, things could come off the rails and become very complicated. And I've seen atomic design in very Byzantine slide decks and PowerPoint decks. So it's like, I want to be careful, it's stable.
Yeah, for sure.
Stable.
Yes, Sasha is also wondering, what is a good team size to introduce a design system? My experience is that it's often a lot of documentation, which does not seem to be a good investment for small teams. Love the shirt, by the way.
Well, thank you. Yeah, team size is one thing, and it's kind of like as big as it needs to be, which is different for different organizations. If you're Salesforce, you're going to have a much different design system needs as, if you are a small startup or if you are just working at like a nonprofit or something like that, right? So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is I think a lot of people look over their shoulders at these very like mature, established, huge design systems, and they think that they need that level of comprehension, and you just simply don't. Yeah. And she's alluding to that with the documentation stuff. The documentation, there's a paradox around documentation, which is nobody likes to write it, nobody likes to read it, And yet, it's really important. so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, what does just enough documentation look like?
Yep.
But then also what's really fascinating is with the advent of all of these other like AI tools and stuff, like the documentation isn't just for human audiences anymore. It's like all of like the kind of like metadata and sort of guidance that you're sort of, helping these machines work with better, right? If the design system are these like building blocks in order to like help the robots figure out which things to reach for and which things to assemble, that documentation is kind of like taking on a new role. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the global design system and also the work that OpenUI has been doing. This is just really impressive to see. And I think, actually, it seems like we're doing something that goes in this direction with, for example, the custom select that we can now slowly start to customize. And so we have
slowly.
I mean, it's not rolled out.
It's been a journey.
It's been a journey.
Yep.
So we can take a component and then just make it more skinnable. Like anybody had to hack around the select drop-down to make it look nicer in some way or the other.
Yeah.
But we also have a lot of native components that are like a date picker, which are just...
Yeah, so there's a dynamic, and it's not like an either or. Some of these are like a holding tank for eventual inclusion in standards, but there's also like work that can be done now to just like ship it sooner. But then there's also like quite a few things, and this is from OpenUI, like the skeleton and badge and other things that they're like, once they like actually propose that to be included in the browser, they're like, no, that's dumb. That doesn't make sense. That's just a div. But it's a concept, right? It's like an important concept that we see in all of these different UI libraries.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I think that we will be able to find you here at the conference and also at the fireplace.
Yeah.
Or if you have any questions, please go there. Please say thank you to our beloved dear friend,
Thank you very much.
Frost. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.